This is Al making a video for AJAX Advantage. In today's video, I'm going to be covering float badges. Float badges are only available in our dynamic package because they use multiple stats. We have float badges in two spots, pre-flop and on the flop. This is an example of a pre-flop float badge. This is an example of a flop float badge. Float badges are positional. FLO means float out of position. FLT means float in position. We also divide the badges into single raise pot badges and 3-bet pot badges. This particular badge is single raise pot. If it were a 3-bet pot badge, it would have a white bottom like the CO, the EI, and the CI badges we see here. So how do float badges work? Well, I think of float badges as alert badges. Badges that alert me to my opponent's subsequent exploitable plan. And by subsequent, I mean subsequent to whatever move they're making right now. So let's take float out of position. So somebody opens up in a non-blind position. I'm in the blinds. I'm holding a borderline hand against a tough reg. I think the cold call would probably be a loser. Against a weaker, more exploitable reg, I think the cold call would very likely be a winner. So I need to determine if my opponent is among the strong, well-balanced, difficult to play against regs, or is he against the weaker, more exploitable regs. Rather than just generally identifying players as, oh, this guy's weak, this guy's strong, I much rather go to individual spots and look at their play in that particular area. And so if I'm out of position, I'm looking at things like fold versus donk play, fold versus flop check raise. How often are they c-betting the flop? When they miss the flop c-bet, how often are they folding to the turn stab? How often are they double barreling? When they miss the double barrel, how often are they folding to the river stab? And it's through all those spots that I get a general rough idea of their level of exploitability. The more exploitable I feel they are, the wider my cold call range. When we were developing this package, we thought, well, why not just make that into a badge system? It's all basically just math. It would be more efficient. We're not going to need to spend the 10 to 15 seconds looking at our opponent's general exploitabilities in all those different areas, roughly adding stuff together, and obviously it's going to be more accurate. And so that's what the float badges are. They're another way of saying that this player's previous play has shown them to be mathematically exploitable in this particular spot. So let's look at this player. He has a float out of position badge. So this is telling me that when I'm in the blinds, I can call with more hands. So where is he exploitable? Well, if we go to the first line has all badges that deal with this opponent's exploitabilities as the pre-flop opener once they see the flop. The two badges that are related to this particular spot is fold versus check raise, single raise pot, and then fold versus turn stab plus river combo, also single raise pot. So this player has 2 points of exploitability in this particular spot. And so what we'll do is we will cold call with additional hands, and then once we see the flop, we'll look to see his exploitabilities and determine, based upon our hand holdings in the board texture, which line we want to use. For this player's flop float badge, it looks like the exploitability is all versus the river stab, and he has a high exploit versus river stab. So this badge is telling us that this player's combination of turn miss c-bet and fold versus river stab is so exploitable, it's actually getting the high exploitability badge, and it's high enough that the float badge is activating and telling us that we can float as wide as we're comfortable. Now, so the final question is how do we adjust our ranges based upon these badges? Well, first you need to understand how the post-flop badges are constructed. The post-flop badges completely ignore any equity you might have in a hand. So a badge is not needed to make totally standard moves. So if you've got, ace high, 2 overs, and a backdoor flush draw, you don't need a float badge to tell you to float there. What the badges are meant to represent, what the float badge is meant to represent, is to show you spots where you can go with wider than normal ranges. So let's say that out of position, typically you would be folding queen jack on an 8 high flop, but your opponent has this FLO badge. Well, because that would previously been kind of like a close-ish fold, now it can be a call. And so typically what I like to do is when a player has a level 1 badge, I like to have a little something, a gut shot, 1 over, 2 overs, just a little bit of equity to go along with this badge. Now, The way the badges are set up, that if their future play matches their previous play, you could technically float here with any 2 cards, and it would make you money, assuming that you're stabbing the river. However, I don't recommend that, and that's why we have level 1 and level 2 badges. We don't want to treat marginally exploitable players the same as we treat highly exploitable players. And so when a player has a level 1 badge, I identify marginal spots that were kind of close folds, and I go ahead and in this spot float. And I wait until I have a level 2 badge, a badge with a white top, and then I allow myself a lot more freedom to float out of position. Would I float 100% of the time? Probably not. I want to consider the combination of the board texture along with my equity to not get too out of line, but I would be floating there the vast majority of the time to take advantage of my opponent's clearly exploitable play. I hope you guys find this video useful, and if you have any other ideas for videos, let me know. This is Alan for AJA Dynamic HUD.